other than a class war, right? Anything else other than a class war, it would be understating the problem. U.S. billionaires grow wealth by over 1 trillion since pandemic began. Report. Okay. Meanwhile, millions of Americans are unemployed and struggling to pay mortgages or rent amidst the corona crisis. Right. Like, what's Joe Biden's plan on that? I'm asking like legit. I'm legitimately asking. Like, I'm not just being a wise ass. Legitimately, what is his plan when it says millions of Americans are unemployed and struggling to pay mortgages or rent amid the coronavirus crisis? Joe Biden says he supports like universal testing, universal mask. But what in his plan? I'm legitimately asking. Helps with this part. That millions of Americans are unemployed and struggling to pay mortgages or rents. Based on his cabinet picks and based on the pivot we see the Democratic Party making post-election, not feeling that confident. Not feeling that confident he'd be able to address that issue. Billionaires in the U.S. has grown their wealth by over a third, or more than 1 trillion since COVID-19 pandemic hit the nation in March, a new report finds. So we are in a new Great Depression, and despite being in a new Great Depression, they grown the wealth over a third. What? And you gotta understand, in Trump's economy, they was already doing historically well. The income inequality gap has exploded. Wall Street's gotten richer. Trump and their friends gotten richer. So they was already winning the game. And just like a wise capitalist once said, Hillary Clinton and her mentors, Henry Kissinger, never let a good crisis go to waste. That is, you guys gotta understand, that's literally what the ruling class believe. A mantra that was passed down generation after generation of ruling class leaders. Never ever let a good tragedy to go to waste. And that's what they did with COVID. They saw a situation to be able to justify doing the largest transfer of wealth in human history. You're talking about 5 trillion. They were pumping in $1 trillion a day into the Fed at one point. And then you had people who are brainwashed who was happy because we got one $1,200 check. You have people like Trump bucks. We got Trump bucks. Meanwhile, it's like, what? You guys celebrating for crumbs? Canada getting $2,000 a month since began this pandemic. There was just a story that just came out a few weeks ago. They extended it until next summer, so they getting $2,000 a month until next summer. And y'all dancing about $1,200 checks one time, and they gave $5 trillion to corporations and billionaires. They've been holding their hands throughout the course of this pandemic. That's the background behind this line here. And like I brought up, at the same time, the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic left millions of Americans jobless and struggling to pay their mortgages, rents, and food bills. So I talk about this all the time because you don't hear you don't hear a conversation about economics. But if you're advancing trickle down economics, if you are a Reaganite, if you're a Nancy Pelosi Democrat, if you're a Joe Biden Democrat, and you legitimately believe in trickle down economics, the theory of trickle down economics is the more money that the billionaire class and the more money that the corporations have, the more money they will be willing to hire people, and the more money they will be able to increase wages and have innovation that leads to job growth and wage growth. So billionaires and corporations has greatly grown their wealth, but at the same time, millions of Americans are jobless, struggling to pay mortgages, they can't pay their rent, and wages haven't gone up in decades. So how am I radical for pointing out the very obvious flaw in your theory? That these two things directly contradict themselves. Meanwhile, you have countries that implement social democracy. They don't even go far enough, in my opinion, but they implement very basic social democracy that's essentially a welfare capitalist state, and they can have higher life expectancy than we do, better quality of life, they live longer. They were able to do that, literally doing the exact opposite of the kind of economics that you guys propose, right? This is good stuff here, because these reports have been released everywhere. Cause there's another one here, a report released Wednesday by the Washington-based institute tracked the net worth of over 650 wealthiest Americans from March 18th to November 24th, and found that dozens joined the rank of billionaires during this period, and 29 saw their wealth double among the pandemic. So, I said it before, the coronavirus has literally been the best thing that has ever happened to the ruling class. Period. The coronavirus shut down Bernie rallies that hurt his campaign tremendously. It allowed Joe Biden to hide throughout the campaign, where the theory of Joe Biden's campaign tanking that a lot of us had was the more that he come out and he had to be forced to campaign and be in public, the more people will see he's not fit. And the few times that he did come out, it did hurt him. But coronavirus gave him an excuse to hide from the public. So that helped them in that sense as well. It helped them grow their wealth. It helped them. It helped the Democrats in the sense that Trump, he handled this virus horribly. He could have made this a much better situation, but at the same time, Trump, just like everyone else, he's bought and paid for. Like the people that pretend he's not, you're crazy, because look at the report. He did what he wanted to do. He got his friends rich. Ivanka Trump, I think she made like $80 million since she joined Trump. Like, that should be illegal, right? That's nepotism of the highest order. She literally got a job as the daughter of the president and invested in real estate and increased her wealth. And people think like Trump is the anti-corruption guy. I literally hear like independent right wingers say shit like that all the time. People, you understand? Like anyone who, people know I don't like Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, but I literally see like sometimes they leftists be like, well, I would prefer Trump to win because at least he's not kind of like, no, wait, slow down, bro. Slow down. You losing me now. You gotta understand, my criticism of Joe Biden and Democratic Party is not that they're worse than Trump. My criticism is that they're like Trump. You don't get, like, don't become a right-wing apologist. I see that all the time. At that level of government, laws are for other people. True, 100%. Do you have money in the stock market? Most Americans don't. What's the number? Let's look it up. But it was like 80% of stock market gains go to like the top 1%. So even people who do got money in the stock market, they got a little saving. They think they're capitalists, but then like the real capitalists are laughing at you. Like, bro, you got chump change compared to what the real capitalists are playing with. But yeah, laws are for other people. And there was a great point made, because like Amazon had these factories, like these stores are being shut down all over the country that have like 25 people that work in there that are being forced to shut down. And then you have Amazon who got these factories with 50, 100 people in them, and they're forced to operate. Like how are they able to get away with that? And people are like, well, they might be tightly regulated. Nah, not really. Not really, because you literally had insider leaks where there was a lot of employees that were testing positive for Amazon, and in any other situation that those businesses was forced to close. But then Amazon literally got away with keeping them hired, and they was literally still operating businesses, just spreading, like being a super spreader. And someone made a great point. I think it was Dore. He was like, Actually, how are they actually able to get away with that? Because there's constant stories of businesses being fined, people going after businesses for not following government ordinances on the coronavirus, which some of them I agree with, because you got like dudes, you got had this like you guys by not following the ordinances for COVID is only making this worse. Like we could have been done with this shit, or we probably could have been done by Christmas, but you guys making it work. Now we got like another 2 years of this, so. But I agree with that. But at the same time, how is Amazon and Jeff Bezos allowed to do all the stuff they do? Whatever. That's my take on like we can dive into the like whole laws or for. There's literally two sets of laws in this country. Anyone know that? Anyone fucking knows that. Like Kyle Rittenhouse, the guy who literally broke this law by he traveled state lines carrying a weapon as a minor, then he killed 2 people, and the right wing is like, oh, Kyle Rittenhouse, he was acting in self-defense. And then you literally had a guy who was like, bro, I'm an independent military guy. I got no string in the game. But if you go into a combat area looking for combat and you engage, that is not self-defense. Like if you look at any military situation, they wouldn't even like if Kyle Rittenhouse was a hostile combatant, they wouldn't say that was a civilian death. Because they were rationale, they traveled to the protest to stop the looting and the violence. So if you know that there's looting and violence and you enter the area, you are not defending yourself. You are a willing combatant. That's how the military and that's how the police would classify that situation. So that's the reality. But he was able to post bail. Meanwhile, there was a story of a black guy who claims his innocence, who he committed suicide because he was literally held in jail without trial for 3 years, committed suicide. So what's the difference? Like, there's a clear disparity in the justice system, not class based, but especially racially based as well. Where black people for the same crime that a white person will commit, they'll get thrown in the book or they'll get a harsher sentence. Just a very, very basic breakdown of that situation. So Inequality.org tweet out, billionaires have hit a disturbing milestone, $1 trillion in wealth gains during the pandemic. Yep, we were talking about Bezos. His net worth grown 61% since mid-March. So the coronavirus has been the greatest investment for Jeff Bezos. And then you got right-wingers and you got bootlickers. Right-wingers, they like to pretend that they oppose Jeff Bezos, right? They always pretend that Jeff Bezos is some sort of liberal plant. Like, bro, your policies enable Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos doesn't exist without the right wing. And when they say the only reason our economy crashed is because of COVID, that's what they like to pull out. They say, well, COVID is the reason why our economy is doing bad. I'm like, that's not an excuse. Pandemics and epidemics happen. Look through, like, study history. You got to act like this is a once in a 100-year thing. We just had one. They called the swine flu under Obama. There were a few in the 80s. There was the AIDS epidemic in the 80s as well. There was an even harsher pandemic in the 1910s and the 1920s. So people are like, oh, this pandemic is the only reason why our economy crashed. Like, bro, that's not an excuse. Capitalism's failure and its inability to prepare for a pandemic is why it's inherently a failed system. Because why did we have a shortage in masks and hospital beds in the beginning of this pandemic? Why are we still struggling on that? Because under a capitalist system, there is no profit to be made in properly preparing for a pandemic. Right? So people are like, well, if it weren't for coronavirus, Trump would have a great economy going to this election. Well, there's nothing that stopped Trump from having a good economy during this election. You guys just don't support the policies that would have helped during this crisis. The policies that Bernie Sanders was talking about. Bernie Sanders, taking the ideas from social democracy, said we should pay all our citizens $2,000 a month, pay them to stay home. That way you can still pump money in local economies as well, have a bottom up approach instead of this bullshit trickle down economics, austerity politics that Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, and Barack Obama implemented, and they continue to push. There is another way to do that. You guys just don't agree, which is why I say that the ideology that you push for is a failed ideology, because it crashes the economy and crashes society every 10 years. We just went through this in 2008. Was there a pandemic then? Capitalism crashes every 10 years. And guess who get harmed the most? African American men. So much so they even have a phrase called for it. First fired, last hired. Because that's what happened during the pandemic. Go to the article. So the point was, if you're a right winger and you think you oppose Jeff Bezos, you really don't. Because you're complicit with this. Like, you're complicit with him growing his net worth 61% since the start of this pandemic. And this is the most morally bankrupt part of this. Amazon's workers, meanwhile, haven't received hazard pay in months. While Amazon is doing amazing business throughout the course of this pandemic, and people had to stay home, they had to order online. But Amazon workers not having received hazard pay. Nearly 20,000 Amazon workers have been infected with the coronavirus. Let's see, that's what I was talking about before. Like, you have these massive infections at these Amazon warehouses. But why isn't there like some sort of massive like inspection on why that's happening? Like, why doesn't the government, like, bro, why are so many people getting sick in your factory? How is that not a question that comes across their mind? Meanwhile, mom and pop stores across the country are being shut down. 2 out of 5 black businesses have shut down since the start of coronavirus because the government is cracking down on them. The government is cracking down on them. Meanwhile, Amazon is allowed to have 20,000 Amazon workers to be affected with no hazard pay. No hazard pay at all. Jesus. And then they got the media got at least qualified with Amazon spokesman. The Amazon spokesman said nothing is more important than the health and safety of our employees. Except the 20,000 that got infected. Instead, we pay our workers at least $15 per hour, providing masks and gloves. Okay, but they still got infected. Like how does that erase the fact that they just said? He was like, all right, let me respond to the damning facts that you laid out against me. My response to that is, we tried our best, but it just didn't work. That doesn't mean anything. And you like, we pay at least $15 an hour. Where your hazard pay? No hazard pay. And $15 an hour. The fight for 15 started 12 years ago. Studies already show if wage match worker productivity, especially Amazon worker productivity. We can't even get to Amazon. This is nationwide. There's been studies that show that Amazon workers should be making at least $100,000 a year. If you just go based on very basic wage splits from original union contracts back when Americans actually had strong unions. If you had just basic wage compensation for back then, every Amazon worker should be making at least $100,000. So that's a different story. But nationally, the minimum wage should be at least $22.50 an hour. And you talking about you bragging about $15 an hour with no hazard pay? And the fucked up thing is, people will read this what the spokesman was saying, and they'd be like, "Oh, I guess he made a good point. Guess capitalism is the way forward." Fuck. It doesn't make any sense to me. Bezos is 1 in 5 centile-billionaires in the world. I don't know what that means. People with net worth with over 100 billion, right? Because we never really advanced for feudalism. Jeff Bezos is one of the most strongest people in the world. Period. Like, I did this breakdown on this the other day. But Bezos, let's see, do I still have it saved here? I don't look like it, but they were literally just caught having a network of spies spying on workers. How's he able to get? So you got a private militia? You got a private network of spies? Are you kidding me? You got the government bought. You got politicians like head over heels to give him tax breaks and tax loopholes and buy him helipads in New York and shit so that they can bring his business over there. So how can you make the argument that Bezos is not one of the most powerful men? How is Jeff Bezos not Lex Luthor? Like how is he not? He is literally real life Lex Luthor. He got a private militia spying on labor, like people that they may suspect of forming a labor union. Crazy. And people lost their mind when AOC opposed them when they were trying to move to New York. And that was a big victory for AOC because AOC said, no, we're not giving them no government tax breaks. Hell nah. If they want to go, her argument is very simple. Because the progressives and left wings are very serious people. Believe it or not. Because she said the reason why do Jeff Bezos and Amazon want to go to New York in the first place? They want to go to New York because we got a large market. So why are you giving up everything so they can bring jobs over here when we actually got the leverage in a giant job market, one of the largest job market, one of the largest economies in the world where you can make the most money. So why are you giving all that up? And anyone from a common sense perspective, anyone from a leftist perspective, will understand that the reason why they're giving up because they bought and paid for it. They understand they got leverage. They don't want to use it because they are bought by Jeff Bezos. So we know that, but for some reason, if you say that, you're out of bounds, right? So AOC properly point that out. The squad properly point that out. Bernie properly point that out. Like, bro, why are y'all giving all these tax breaks to Bezos and giving all these government handouts to them when they need to do business in our economy? Where they're gonna go? So guess what happened? Amazon they pretend to throw a fit, and they said we're gonna pull out of the deal. A few weeks passed. They signed a deal. And then the right wing and neoliberals was quiet. So they signed a deal without none of the tax breaks. Because they eventually like, oh shit, we actually do need to get it in New York. So the New York Democrats were trying to give them a shit ton of money in tax breaks. They were trying to build Jeff Bezos a helipad. And Amazon walked from the deal at first. They don't say like, fuck them then. We just invest in local businesses then. And then Amazon was like, oh, actually, we need to come back. And then they literally they came back in New York without the government contract. I mean, without the tax breaks. So that was a net win on AOC. That was a big win on her part. The U.S. unemployment rate was nearly 7% last month with over 11 million. See, that's the bullshit unemployment rate. What's the real unemployment rate? The unemployment rate that actually calculates the people who are out of work. Like that. That's the propaganda number. The one like they don't even count people who gave up work, looking for work. If you like been out of work for like a year, they don't even count you on that. So, I mean, most leftists know that though. It's just so much capitalist bullshit. Like you gotta explain very basic stuff to people like that. The U.S. Census Bureau survey of American households found that October 28th to November 9th. Over 15 million households, or 28% of renters surveyed, had either no confidence or a slight confidence of being able to make next month's payments. See, this is where things get interesting. This is what Richard Wolff pointed out. Because capitalists, people who are unable to actually look into the things in long terms, do you understand what that amount of people not be able to pay their rent means? Like throughout the course of the society, because I'm not a fan of landlords. Everyone know that. But if you have all these renters who can't pay rent, and you got landlords who owe money to the bank, and they don't have that money they're able to pay to the bank, you have trickle down crime. Like people they are confused how boom bust works. They're like, why do capitalism crash so much? Because it's shit like it's not designed to handle a mass breakdown like this. Because if you invest to the top down, this is what happens.